In this movie, we'll look at some additional aspects of lifelines in sequence diagrams. We'll look at active objects which run on their own thread, and then at how states of lifelines can be shown on diagrams. Active objects are instances of classes that have the isActive flag set to true. What this means is that when an instance of one of these classes is created, it begins to execute its behavior, effectively running on its own thread of control. So these would be used for classes that run as server processes, for example. Lifelines representing these kinds of objects have two lines at the sides. In the home automation system, we may have an instance of an event responder class, which sleeps for a period of time, and then wakes up and checks for any timed events at that time, and polls all the sensors for values that would trigger triggered events. It could put these events onto a queue. The instance of the device manager class then takes events off the queue and sends signals to the appropriate devices, instructing them to switch on or off or open or close and so on. Each of these two runs on its own thread. States can be shown on sequence diagrams. The state is shown on the lifeline in a round-ended shape with the name of the state in it. For the interaction to be valid and continue, the object represented by the lifeline must be in this state. Here, the physical device is sent the message to switch on, and the object current device is having its state set to on by the setState operation. Let's have a look at how this would work in practice. Here we are in Enterprise Architect. We'll start with adding an active object, and for that we need an active class. I'll add a package to the class view called Event Management, where management is MGT as an abbreviation, with a class diagram in it. I right-click on Class View, select Add a Package, give the package a name, check that Create Diagram is checked, click OK. It's going to be a UML structural diagram, and it's going to be a class diagram, and it'll be called Event Management. I'll add a class called Device Manager to that class diagram. I click on Class in the toolbox, and then click in the diagram. To set it to be an active class, in the Properties, I go to the Details tab of the General page, and you can see there's a checkbox called isActive. I check that. In the class diagram, you can see that this class has two lines on each side. This makes it an active class. I'm going to use the lifeline for this active class in the Add a Device sequence diagram later, so I'll add it in now. I'm going to the Configuration Use Cases, and I'm going to the sequence diagram for Add a Device. If I click on Add a Device, you can see that the first thing that's added below it in the project browser is an interaction. This acts as a kind of wrapper for the sequence diagram. And here's the sequence diagram for Add a Device, so I'll open that. I'm going to put Device Manager into that, so I'm going to drag it in from the project browser as a lifeline. I select Lifeline from the dialog box, click OK. You can see that the lifeline for Device Manager has two lines on each side in the same way as the active class. This represents an active object. Now I'm going to add some more to this sequence diagram. So far it's only got as far as displaying the GUI. I'll close up some of the gaps. That makes it take up less space on the page. Now I'm going to add some messages for the values being entered into the GUI. I'll do this informally with a message for each value. First name, then type, then address. Then the actor clicks on the Submit button. So I'll show that as a message and call it Submit. Now, most of the interaction there is going from the engineer actor to the GUI Add Device UI lifeline. So I'll swap the two lifelines, GUI and controller, over. That now makes slightly more sense. Now I'm going to send a message from the GUI to the controller, and I'll call that Submit as well. So that message is the GUI notifying the controller that the actor has entered the data and clicked the Submit button. I'll put in a message for the controller to then get the values from the GUI, although in reality this might have to be as many messages as there are values that have been entered. So the actor has entered the details to create a device, and what the controller is going to do now is it's going to create a device object, a lifeline for device, and it needs to be one of the specific types of device. I'll use on-off device in this case. I drag it in as a lifeline, and it's been added into the diagram. I'll now add a message from controller to that lifeline. The two lifelines here, get values and that lifeline, are in the wrong order. If that happens to you, you can press and hold the Alt button while dragging the lifelines to reposition them, and it will reorder them. This message here is going to be a creation message to create an instance of device. So I'll add it to the operations of the on-off device. I won't bother with the parameters. It doesn't have a return value. I make sure it's selected and close. And down here, I set this to be new in the lifecycle dropdown. You can see now that this is a creation message going to the head of the lifeline. Now, when this on-off device is created, I'm going to assume that it's in an undefined state. So I'm going to add a new state into the diagram. And to do that, I click on State or Continuation in the toolbox, and then click on the lifeline where I want the state to appear. This is the dialog box for adding a state to a sequence diagram. You'll see that it has braces in the condition field, which I don't need. And I'll just type in the name of that state, which I'll call unknown. You can see that the state has been added to the on-off device's lifeline. So, in this movie, we've created an active class and the lifeline for an active object, and we've added a state to a lifeline.